If it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed by the truth.
2020 is a shit show indeed, but these are Gnostic times in a Philippidic world. More and more individuals like Adrian are seeing this and accepting a more nuclear and shamanistic form of Christianity, or religion in general.
Where there is fire, we will carry gasoline.
But hey, it's also the Age of Hermes. Today's world is both his creation and playground. After all, Hermes is the god of transition, of dawns and dusks, of initiation and doorways of perception. The door hinges belong to Hermes, as Jungian Dennis Merritt said. He is the god of the mind and the god of tricks, and thus he can lead the way or lead astray. Hermes is both the logos and the meltdown that plunges you over the sanity edge.
See, madness, as you know, is like gravity. All it takes is a little push.
Hermes revels in pandemonium, but comforts those who have nothing to lose. Calls his friends the freak and the outcast. Hermes is the guide of those going into the underworlds of their broken dreams and mad-filled past to try it one more time and get it right this time. He is the messenger of your soul, just as Sophia is the manifestation of the world soul.
For my time path vanished like a breath, and I am become matter.
Some of you may wonder why America is so insanely dualistic and schizophrenic, especially during the pandemic and all the social disorder. That's because America belongs to Hermes, as detailed in Stephen Heller's suddenly relevant book, Freedom, Alchemy for a Voluntary Society. In a very Neil Gaiman American God's way, Heller writes that the founding fathers, from their Freemason lodges and liberal universities, brought Hermes to America, and he infused the entire collective consciousness of this continent. As Heller writes, the chief inspirer of the American Republic was not Moses or Jesus, and even less St. Augustine or St. Aquinas, but rather Hermes Trismegistos of old. Hermes, who survive among the alchemists, magicians, Rosicrucians, esoteric Freemasons, and the French Enlightenment philosophers, crossed the Atlantic on his winged sandals and stood with the caduceus in the first assemblies of the Continental Congress.
You know, the Templars and the Freemasons believed that the treasure was too great for any one man to have. Not even a king. That's why they went to such lengths to keep it hidden.
That's right. The founding fathers believe the same thing about government. I figure their solution will work for the treasure too.
Give it to the people.
Yes, the founding fathers thought they brought Hermes in his full Gnostic aspect of Trismegistos. But this archetypal force mingled and was weaponized by the trickster spirit of the Native Americans, and girded his loins against a dark egregore that had arrived separately centuries earlier on the Mayflower and other ships. Jehovah, or the Puritan spirit as Heller calls it.
I think I've lost control again and put it all down to evolution.
Hermes has mostly governed the American soul, however. Hermes is the deity of innovation and exploration and optimistic reasoning. But in his shadow side, he is the god of thievery and financial greed and cruel shitposting, as seen in myths like him stealing the cattle of Apollo or trolling and gaslighting innocent mortals and gods alike. Very American, as most around the world know and would agree, especially after the Empire arrived in the late 19th century and placed the hologram over the gringo awareness.
The Empire is the institution, the codification of derangement.
What the hell happened to us? What happened to the American dream?
It came true! You're looking at it.
Hermes oversees America, and that's why its citizens act like they do, and are acting even more in 2020. This country, as Heller writes, has always been a frenetic alchemical laboratory. Much like other Hermes caliphates in history, like ancient Alexandria, Renaissance Florence, medieval Haran or Baghdad, or Persian Halamut of the Assassins. Yes, America is a place of magic and meaning, but again, Hermes on these shores is perhaps a triple-faced deity when you include the coyote and the Puritan.
So we're trapped here, inside your dream. You'll never let us sleep.
We are indeed trapped here in his dream. I hope you enjoyed that old video that I made in 2020, and it's certainly still relevant today, and it's very relevant to our topic and our guest. What can be destroyed by the truth must be destroyed by the truth. And where there is fire, we will carry gasoline. A quote from an old punk band. So welcome everybody to Aeon Byte. This is a special stream, one of the gated streams for all members. And of course, there will be a shorter version for everybody else. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, that madman across the waters of creation. And I'm in a different backdrop because, well, it's Hermes. Things got to change. You got to do tricks. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest, and that is Steve Crimi. How are you, Steve? And thank you very much for coming on the show and discussing really one of my favorite books and one of the more comprehensive encyclopedia, both spiritual and historical and mythological works on Hermes. Hermes Runs the Game. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, well, you're welcome. My pleasure. It's an honor, and in this august company, what could be nicer? I do know Sherlyn from she's been at our house, and it's been really nice to see you again. You look wonderful. Everybody looks wonderful. Everyone is probably a lot healthier than they were last year. I know we've all been through some, and as have many people, been through some interesting things to have gone through, especially health-wise. And I'm just getting it back and just getting a little mojo back. I'm able to do things, so I feel really grateful for that. And I don't know what it has to do with Hermes Caduceus or anything. But and thank you for your kind words about my book. It took 4 years to write it, and I have to get this out right away. My friend Shona Holm, who's also one of the authors that we publish, she said that I have to say that her take is that it is a modern mystery initiation manual, and that's very kind of her to say that. But it sort of works. It's one of those things where you kind of I only really saw what the book was until when it was done, because I do employ an ancient Greek muse, Thalia, who is known as who's the daughter of Memory and Apollo. And she's generally considered the muse of comedy, but of course, comedy for ancient Greece was not, Seinfeld. Let's put it that way. It was something else was going on, and basically it's things tied up neatly at the end, as opposed to tragedy where they fell apart at the end, and that gets back to Love and Strife with Empedocles, the big pumps on everything. So anyway, thank you for having me. I'm open to any questions, directions that you'd like to talk about as far as the book goes, and anything else.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the first part we should talk about Hermes, and then behind the paywall we can get into the spicier stuff of the pandemic and so forth. But yeah, Sherilyn, welcome back. Always good to see you.
Yeah, great to see everyone. Steve, so great to see you again and have a conversation with you this morning. I'm so glad that you came through your challenge. As I said, we got to have you around, all of us. We got to have all of you all around for a lot longer. We got a ways to go. So I'm so interested to hear you talk about this book. I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Miguel, for the opportunity. Hey, Vance.
Hey, Vince, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Hermes has always fascinated me because he's such a nexus character. He draws so many things together. There's a reason he's thrice great. All the aspects of Hermes. On the one hand, he is the fount of wisdom and represents the logos, which ties him to Jesus Christ, really. And then on the other hand, he's the trickster. And I think that's because he embodies communication. And communication is always, there's always the potential, there's the fire and the gasoline, the one side and the other, the dialectic. So he's an all-encompassing, and if you look at Hermetic literature, it's all over the map. There's no particular philosophy. It examines almost all philosophies and all different types of theurgy, astrology, and alchemy. So let's get into it, and I'm very interested to hear.
Yeah, let's do it. And well said indeed. Yeah, I mean, Hermes, Steve mentioned the caduceus, and that's why I think so many reasons Hermes is so important, because the caduceus offered Hermes the one thing that the other gods didn't have, that the other animals, the other insects, the other atoms, it made him immune to fate. And in ancient times, nobody was immune to fate. So that's why Hermes is so great. And as I keep saying, there ain't no Horus or Age of Horus. Jesus isn't coming back. There's no Kali Yuga. We are in the age of Hermes, and only by understanding him will we get through from 2020 to now. What do you think about this, Steve? Would you agree? This is his time.
Yes, and my book though is not so much of the later Hermes, Trismegistus. It's more of the Greek mythological deity, and of course I don't, and then that gets us into what is mythology, and the fact is that at least I see that mythology is something that's ever happening. So it is not a one and done. It's not a story of the past, but real mythology exists in what was once called by Henri Corbin the imaginal realm, and there's the imaginal realm is this sort of in between place. And of course, this is one of Hermes' places. He's liminal. He runs the in-between world. He runs the three worlds. He's the only entity that can go from Olympus to the real world into Hades. I mean, he has to go down and get Persephone. A goddess as great as Persephone can't find her way out of it, Hades, without Hermes. So Hermes knows all the roads, all the byways, everything that's traveled. So his coverage is immense, and I didn't even know where to start or end. But anyway, so he's so this is getting back to this aspect of that I think Vance brought up with the communication. The two main aspects, the communication, because this world is a linguistic construct in many ways. And everything that we encounter, so for example, all the ops that we encounter, they're all linguistic constructs, right? And Hermes, for good and for bad. So it's the same mechanism that promotes the positive and the negative. We'll call it that because we think we know the difference. That the detrimental beings know the same thing, and in fact, it's part and parcel of how this world comes from, as the Greeks spoke, the one into the many, and the one into the many. So the book is designed in three parts, basically, to understand, and it's all about sacrifice. And you have to understand to understand the book, to understand what sacrifice is, to understand all the evil sacrifice that is happening now, and especially to children, that breaks our hearts, that it is all a distortion and inversion of the original sacrifice. So what's the original sacrifice? The original sacrifice is of the one, the deity, I guess the Gnostic word might be pleroma, into the many, into the manifest, into manifest experience, all right? So, and to understand it, you have to understand that this is all, the only thing that's real is our experience. All right. So according to the pre-Socratic philosophers, according to the yogis, who say the same thing, and I'm sure there was some sort of cross-reference between some sort of hermetic discussions between them early on, that the world as an illusion, but it's not an illusion, that there's a real world out there somewhere. And this is where Plato, in my mind, goes astray or leads us astray, that there is a realer world somewhere, right? But the fact is, you can never find it through Plato, because you can only get to it through rational thought. And this is the project of philosophy since Plato. So they're all stuck on looking for this world. You know, it's Socrates' last teaching, talking about the world is, that we're inside the earth. And but, and then of course, the famous allegory of the cave, where you're taken outside of the cave, and see the real world. Well, this is another inversion of Plato's. And if I ramble, rein me in, please.
No, it's great.
This is an inversion of Plato's, the cave. The cave is where Hermes was born, right? Where many of the deities were born. They're born or raised in caves. And the whole, the founding document to me of Western civilization is the Parmenides poem. And this comes out of the work of Peter Kingsley, who Chris and I got to study with here in Nashville for 5 years, work with through incubations. And in that incubation, which is lying still, which is like the corpse pose in yoga, where you're lying absolutely, completely still. And in that stillness, you can sometimes drop into or connect with the Chthonic realms. You can, and this is where you can connect with Persephone and the underground wisdom. And this is what Pythagoras did. Pythagoras had an incubation chamber famously under his house, where his detractors said his mother would drop notes down so that he would come back knowing like the news of the day, things like that. So they said Pythagoras was a trickster in that sense. I believe that he and these ancient Greeks practiced incubation, this lying still in darkness. So these are the caves, and this is what Plato inverts. So he turns the cave into this chain of ignorance, right? And the only person I know of who's spoken of this is a scholar. Her name is Yulia Usanova, who's written books about the divinity of the caves and things like that. She's the only person that even hints at this. So this Plato's, so the inversion into that. And so where are you finding the real through Plato? Well, it's rational real, right? And this is and you can't get to the real through thought, in my summation. So that you have to get it through Gnosis. You have to get it through direct experience. It's the only thing there is. And this is what these people were all on about and how to do it. So the Parmenides poem is written in what is it, Sherlin? Didactic hexameter, right? So it's written in Greek verse, which drove Aristotle nuts, because he's like, well, why can't you just say it, in prose, right? Well, the fact is these poems were incantatory. They were chanted. And it's like, Sanskrit, they all have, they all have certain, rhythms and things like that. So this knowing, this deep underground wisdom is our inheritance, Western civilization. It's the sounding bell of Western civilization that early on gets transmuted, inverted by Plato and especially Aristotle. So Aristotle, because Aristotle gives us this, they call it the excluded middle logic, and I'm not really good at logic, but basically it's an either or logic, right? So you're stuck, either something is or isn't.
All right.
Whereas Eastern logic, or people like Nagarjuna in the Tibetan, Indian, in the Buddhist tradition, there's a four-way logic. Thing is, the thing isn't, the thing is and isn't, and it neither is nor isn't. All right, and all those things are true simultaneously. And this is something the Greeks understood, right? That all these things are true. All these various mythologies are true simultaneously, eternally, and continuously. So I kind of barked a lot at you. So I don't know if you want to jump on that or something. Or
no, it's great. It's a great starting point, and you're right. There's another book written by Charles Stein, The Light of Hermes Trismegistus. It's a great book, and he talks what you said, that Parmenides came with the idea of being and becoming, and Western civilization has been playing catch up from Plato to trying to figure out Parmenides, and Hermes is the great representation of being and becoming. It's the ultimate one. And going back to Vance too, the Gnostics, the Essenes did equate Jesus to Hermes, so they knew the game. And but of course they coded it as always. But Sherilyn, do you have a question about a Hermes, or do you want to let us know from a Jungian point, who is Mr. Hermes?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we could talk for so many hours. I have so many questions for Steve and everyone, but it's making me think about coming back to this sort of complete character, right? Where it's been split off into a savior and a devil. And as Jung goes into an ion, talking about how we're moving out of this time period of the hostile brothers, right? Where you have these two opposites. So it gets split off from a Hermes figure who is traversing both of these worlds into a savior and a devil, but that now we're coming back into a time of the union of opposites rather than this realm of the hostile brothers that are, there's always this opposition. And it seems so much more of an apt archetype for us to consider, this being or this energy that's containing both within itself. And that's something that in our own lives, and I use this example with my kids and even my 10-year-old, as you were saying, Steve, this was a program, and it was installed early on in Greek philosophy with Plato and especially Aristotle to make this either or sort of, this dyad that you can't get out of. And that even in our own lives, just stop for one moment and think, in your own life, how many times is a decision ever that simple? Are there ever just two things that you have to take, that you have to factor in to making a good decision? Even as it's a great example I use with little kids, and because they can see it for themselves. It's never like that. So we keep getting this message that that's what it's like, but our lived experience shows us every day it's never like that. And so I love this exploration of Hermes as a figure that we can look to go back into a more complete understanding of our lived experience rather than denying it all over and over again. And I really love that in your book so there were big parts of it, because I've been looking at this, on both sides throughout that time period that you cover, 2020 to 2024, where aligning all this political and, all these different machinations with this mythic, they're not separate. But the fact that you include both of that in your book, right? And I thought it's such a great introduction for, people that have never looked at it, right? The normies, because so many of them, they don't know these facts. Yeah. They don't know the facts behind what they were being told. And I love when Jung he also says that in Ion, they said that no matter how much you deny them, denying facts doesn't make them any less real, right? So True. Pairing the facts of what happened and what was going on behind the scenes with the mythic is really genius. I really appreciated that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So, I don't think that, again, I have a muse working through me, so I don't take credit. But I don't think there's anything quite like this out there that runs that sort of combination. And to bounce off what you said, yes. So the good and evil thing is a false dichotomy that's laid on us. And so like the true dichotomy, and I get into it briefly in the book, is Hermes and Hecate. Because they both sort of cover the liminal. They're both the deities guarding doorways and entrances and exits. Of course, Hermes being the psychopomp, so Hecate is but if you want to take the life being diurnal, right? Hecate is the night side of everything, and Hermes is the day side of everything. And I don't know a lot about, so I did just a little passage where I put them, at least put them together as a comparison, because I think that's the real dichotomy, that to understand, and that they're both, they both bring about, understanding and wisdom in their own way, and it's not knowledge of, but it's knowledge in or knowledge through. If my true writing, I say I'm not writing about, but I'm writing from, and then this is, you can take that back to living. If you have had the experience of Gnosis, and like a fine wine, you've made it, made it ripen correctly. Right. This is that's what you live from. You live from those knowings, and that's that's our essay. That's what we try to do here, as best we can.
Indeed. And yeah, I know I'm going to go back to the Gnostics, but that's my job, right? That's why you guys brought me here and allow me to stay. But in Gnosticism, Sophia and Jesus definitely fall into the trickster archetype. And I'm not something other scholars have said, Sophia is always, both are liminal figures, both are invading this world and playing tricks on the rulers of this world. Both bring knowledge, but both also bring dangers, as that quote from the video where Sophia tragically says in the Pistis Sophia, so my time has passed like a breath and I have become matter. And at one point she says, I have become a demon. They can turn on you, both the Gnostic Jesus and and Sophia. So this powerful myth, as you say, Steve, is going with these individuals who are smuggling this gnosis in different ways throughout history. So sort of as a foundation, going to the dark side, since we've had a good conversation on who Hermes is, sacrifice. Obviously, that's part of Hermes' myth, and you related to today. Maybe tell the audience sacrifice from the ancient Greek way in Hermes.
Okay, right. So I started off talking about and wandered away from the original sacrifice, which is from the one into the many, and everyone talks about it. You read the Tao Te Ching, the one becomes the two becomes the three become the 10,000. All right, you've got, and I run through a lot of ancient texts, where it's discussed in the Sufi literature. It's I was a hidden jewel, and I wanted to be known. So the one sacrifices itself into the many to know itself through us. All right, and so that sacrifice is the original sacrifice. So it sacrifices its completeness into the multifarious aspects of the world. But the key to understanding it, and if you go back to the Parmenides poem, is that what's really real is the being, the one, unchanging, unmoving, doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end, right? And then, of course, then you have the whole Heraclitus world of things moving, changing, and that. So, and in the poem to Parmenides, of which we have at least most of it, she says, well, there's that, and then here's the world of fabrication. and here's the world, and I'm going to give you the best thing. So she teaches him about the Tropic of Cancer, about the world as a sphere, and all this. It's about the world as an illusion, as a trick, and it is a trick, and it's a divine trick. And there's the greatest thing, and and you can, if you read Peter Kingsley's Reality, especially, it brings you to the conclusion, and this is a possible experience, a human experience, where the world is not, there's no world existing without you. There's no independently existing world. And this is the toughest thing to wrap your mind around, because it's your mind, and it's your mind that through which this world is projected and considered real and considered continuous and existing, right? But the fact is, if you, from the mystic standpoint, and from the standpoint of, I guess, these pre-Socratics who founded the Western tradition, and I don't know a lot about Egypt, but I certainly and I know a little bit about Sanskrit because I spent 10 years, working with that system. That that they call it Maya, and so, but there's no real world outside of that, and that's just like a really tough nut for the mind to swallow, to realize that this is it. So that whether it's the Sophia or anything, all the deities experience the world through our sensorium. That's all there is. There is no world outside of that. Without us, there is no experience for the day. They don't know what the world is, because our sensorium is the light of the world. It is, and this is an experience that's possible. So, but we get, but it's a really hard one to talk about unless you've had that experience. And even if you've had, some sort of thing on mushrooms or something like that, or ayahuasca, you might have had a glimpse into this. But the problem is the ego, which also, the ego glamps onto it, especially what's called the spiritual ego, and it claims the experience for itself. So everyone who's talking about simulation and matrix and all this stuff, not one person talks about their personality as such. So, the whole world, well, it's all a computer simulation, but me, I'm real, right? and this is, but once you have that experience, you realize that you're a friggin' joke. My personality is a joke. And so this is the line, and I know you recently had Giorgiani on, his first name, Jason Giorgiani.
Yeah,
right?
good friend.
It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But he can't cross that line. I was just reading his new book, and he can't cross that line where the personality has to exist independently, right? Which isn't, he can't do both. In other words, that it's an and both thing. The idea that this Steve Crimi guy has got to live this world and go through this life and accumulate, run through this karma, but also that it's a complete fiction, it's a complete joke. Both exist, both are true. Like, as Sherilyn said, many things are true simultaneously. But he can't do that. He's stuck with the Aristotelian either or. That it's got to be one or the other. All right, and this is a real difficulty for everyone. It's a real difficulty to get past. So I don't know if that even answers any part of your question, but it leads into this, the whatever we want to call the dark side, the archons, this other aspect of control system. It's the same system that creates a sacred world. So, for example, the ancient Vedic rishis chanted a world into existence. The Celtic bards chanted a world into existence. So the world that they chanted is the world, right? The world that is being chanted into existence for us now is the world for that. There's the world we experience, the world of COVID ops, the world of MK Ultra, the world of deceit, the world of trickery, But again, the original trick is the fact that this is a real independently existing world, which is a divine trick, right? But layered on top of that are further linguistic tricks, and I don't know. So am I starting to make sense, or am I losing it? Is that?
I understand what you're saying.
So this is the issue. So you have to understand all this. This is the purport of the book. And this is why it's kind of like, in the Greek, you had the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
The lesser mysteries, more or less, were the mythologies, the understanding, and then the purification rituals also. You would go into the ocean, the part of the walk to Eleusis, would be some time spent in the ocean. And other curious things, like there's a particular bridge where a bunch of like old ladies would like curse at you when you're crossing the bridge, and make fun of you and call you all, oh, so you think that's a penis? Check out Hermes, and then, and you'd be like, so this is all, and that was all to take down your aggrandized sense of selfhood as you're going towards. And then what happened later were the greater mysteries, which was the revelation of the light, whatever that is, which astonishingly has been kept secret, at least in Eleusis, for 1,000 years. People went through this initiation and no one really talked about it. That's an astonishment, all those people. So what do we have? We're at the end of an age, apparently,
right.
And we've gone through, we're at the, the Iron Age, or, the Kali Yuga, and this is our greatest distance from the divine light, the greatest distance from internal understanding. And it's a real struggle to get there, because there are so many overlays that we have to, that we have to unpack and undo, because we all think it's real. We've been told it's real from the beginning. We've been told, but then all of a sudden what's happening now, all of a sudden people realize, well, the health system isn't here to cure us. The education system is not here to teach us. The political system isn't here to help us. They all do the opposite of what, they're supposedly intended to. The CIA didn't become a rogue organization. It was designed to do what it does, from the outset. The FBI, this is what they're doing, what they were designed to do. So, so the first step for us, I think, is to see what's going on. So this is why I started with the divine and going from the one into many. And of course, there's a musical theory that how that goes. The breaking up of the octave shows how is one model of how it works. And then of course, the famous Vesica Pisces, the circle divides into two circles. They cross with a Vesica Pisces in the middle. And that's really beautifully shown in one of the portals at Chartres Cathedral, which was really, I think, the last stand of mystic Christianity. And in it is the Christ, is the Logos, holding a book. And so, so you understand. So that Logos is that overlap between the pure divine feminine and the pure divine masculine. And that's through which, and that's the overlap, of course, and that's the womb, the Vesica Pisces, the what was it called, the Mandalora, I think is the ancient word for it, and so everything birthed through that, and birthed through that, and that's all, and all the sacred dimensions are through there, all the, square root of 2, square root of 3, 5, pi, all those dimensions are drawn from that Vesica Pisces. They all derive from that. And so anything that's done on those dimensions, like the Chartres cathedrals, the ancient temples, they resonate with those original structures of existence. And that's the Hermetic Logos, right? And so when you go into them, you resonate with them, you vibrate with them. Whereas opposed you go to a Walmart, or you go to a school, or you go to a prison, or you go to a hospital, which are all, derived on the same architecture, you feel like shit, right? You feel like shit because you're supposed to feel like shit, and so you're supposed to make yourself feel better by pulling out your credit card, which of course is a whatchamacallit, a phi ratio rectangle. Perfect phi ratio because they want it to feel good in your hand, right? It's all by design. So this is again another inversion. I'll let someone else talk, but I can.
Yeah, credit card. There's another Hermetic trick. 20% interest.
Right. Commerce. Well, he's the deity of commerce, right? And Mercury. Mercury means commerce in Latin, also. So but also this is what makes Hermes the closest to the people. So because one, he's roads, travelers. And of course boundaries, and so you would have a Herm, which was a square statue, and later they would have might have a carved statue of Hermes, the depiction of Hermes on the top, and they were often priapic, and then you would give little cakes to those statues if you were on the road. They were like markers on the road, and you would give them a cake, and apparently also, if there was also left for other travelers who might be hungry, and there would be gifts for them too, sort of a pay it forward kind of thing for Greece. So he's in the middle of commerce, and you're talking about your intro, the United States. Of course, New York, when the Dutch founded it, it was something like 60 or 70 years before they even built their first church.
Wow.
New York was founded on commerce. It was like the whole, whereas the Puritans, they were sleeping, bare in the mud, while they were building their church. The first thing they did, as opposed to, in New York City and in New Amsterdam, Wall Street and everything like that was that's what they were there for. So this is why what's happening in New York is another horrible inversion certainly for the people. I live there, and I grew up in Queens, New York. So, and I grew up in a good time to grow up in New York.
Indeed. So what you're talking about, what happened in 2020 is basically sacrifice, and we have an inversion, a corruption, you might say, of the Hermetic principles. Even I remember, and this was, again, it's not like I thought of it, but Chris Knowles mentioned with the George Floyd death that this was not only just a sacrifice, a horrible execution, obviously, but it was the start of a new religion, and it had all the features of a religion. I mean, people were having visions, and there was murals and dreams, and as Chris said, nature abhors a vacuum. So this religion was sort of set in place. And in the West, as a wise man said, we don't create our, what did he say? We don't create our gods. We edify our victims, our criminals. We deify our criminals, which Jesus, it had Muhammad, all these founders were criminals at first. So George Floyd fit that. And then, of course, he had the lockdowns, this massive spell that worked on billions of people and crashed even to now our economy and everything else. So what do you think, Steve? This was an inversion that worked very well, a dark spell.
Right. So I can run through. So the first book is about the original sacrifice. The second part of the book is about that, is how COVID was an inversion of the ancient Greek animal sacrifice. Okay. And that was, the Greeks were different in that everyone was sacrificing animals. But the Greeks actually are the only ones that I know of who had a communal meal from the sacrifice. All right. And so part of the animal was dedicated to the deities, and part of the animal was eaten right there and then, as it was almost like it was like a party. And that's and that goes back to and that's as I describe it, that goes back to Prometheus supposedly tricking Zeus, and it's a whole odd story because he tricks Zeus supposedly into piling up this this bunch of crap, the offal, and but it looked big, and then this other part of the good stuff, and so Zeus, pick one. But in the myth itself, Zeus knows what Prometheus is up to, yet he picks it, and then he gets pissed at Prometheus, and takes fire from the humans so that they won't sacrifice anymore, which was really not bright, because gods don't exist without the humans sacrificing and acknowledging them. So not very bright on Zeus's part. Prometheus, of course, steals the fire from Olympus in a stalk of fennel, and which is like a Greek huge plant, not like the fennel we know of. And then of course he gets punished with that. We're having his liver eaten forever until finally I think it's Heracles that releases him. But so the Greek sacrifices, animal sacrifice was really part of their culture. They had no real religion as we know it, even though they try to look back and read back on Orphism and things like that, a Greek religion. But that's of course the Christians doing that, and of course the Christians claim that they did the one and done sacrifice with Jesus, but of course, like burning Giordano Bruno and ripping apart Hypatia, and burning the Cathars. Well, those weren't real sacrifices, were they?
No.
Tucker Carlson saying, well, the Christians never persecuted anybody, you stupid ninny. So it's a tough nut. And, and I'm doing this really in trying to counter this Christian right dogmatic Zionist takeover that's going on, and it's really exemplified by the whole thing with Turning Point USA and the sacrifice of Mr. Kirk and the rise of the anti-Sophia Erica Kirk. So that's a whole other story. But so the COVID very quickly, so the parts of the sacrifice would be first the invocation. So what gets invoked, so before COVID was Event 201. Event 201 was a rehearsal of the whole thing, praying to the meaty gods, all the sort of, the Hermetic bimbos were getting together and saying, well, we need to do this, and, we have to control everything, control the narrative, which is completely the realm of Hermes. And this is, so this is what they rehearsed. So this was the invocation, right? Then again, the first thing we heard about when this supposed virus was taking over was, well, you got to wash your hands all the time, right? And normally you just wash your hands with water, which is, the purest of substance. It's an ablution. The ablution is the first thing you do when you're doing a sacrifice or any ritual. And what are you doing the ablution with? Well, not with water. You have to use Purell, which is, of course, again, another ironic word. Well, it's not pure at all. It's chemical. It soaks into your hands. It makes you sicker. So the next stage. Then they had a processional. And the processional, where they would choose the best of the best animals, and it was a big sacrifice. It would be a cow or a bull or sometimes a goat, chicken if it was different, depends on the scale and the ceremony. And it's called a Tutoria is the name of the ancient Greek sacrifice. A word something like that maybe. So what happens, instead of the processional, which ran through the marketplace, ran through the town, again, the Hermetic commerce area, it ran through that, and then it went to a temple, and it would cross the threshold, which is again the Hermetic area. You go into the temple and you perform the sacrifice. Well, there was no processional, of course, because we were locked in. We couldn't lock in. Weren't allowed to, and these people would sing, they'd chant, weren't allowed to speak freely, and we were stuck inside, especially England, and Australia, who were really draconian. But you know, it was still here. We had lockdowns in Asheville. We had a curfew at night. So you weren't allowed to process. And then, of course, when you get to, and of course, the animal was slit in the throat. Blood was collected, sprinkled on the altar. The animal divided up. So the priest was also a butcher, and he knew how to, you know, do that. And then there would be a celebration, poetry, plays, whatever, and you would eat this communal meal. And of course, we weren't even allowed to go to restaurants. Forget about communal meals, right? Everything was opposite to what a Greek sacrifice entailed. And then, of course, George Floyd.
Join Patreon, AB Prime, or YouTube membership for all complete episodes and other aeonic rewards, including monthly Q&As, a private RSS feed, exclusive Gnostic vlogs, articles, ebooks, and private groups. Join the resistance and escape the Black Iron prison.